saving time and looking great. This presentation will help you to design effective templates and leave blank pages in the past. Because what an effective template can do is that it can completely change the way in which you work, making it easier for you to focus on the stuff that you want to focus on and still have everything look really cool when you're done. And you know, this all started for me because graphics design is my passion. There was totally even more laughs the first time I said this when the recording was initially thought it was going. But I'm not going to give away all the elements of this presentation away too quickly. The crux of the argument is this: we can be so busy writing that design becomes an afterthought. Has that ever happened to you? If so, you aren't alone. It's very common that we just start writing, we start doing stuff, and then we think like, I don't want to do all that stuff to make it look pretty. That's the last step. And that seems like it makes sense because the real value is in the writing after all, right? Well, it would be if when we read things, we read everything perfectly as it was on the screen. But we're spoiled. We're spoiled on good design. We're spoiled on things being easy and accessible to us. And if we see just a block of text, it's not going to engage us in quite the same way. So there's a lot of value in, from the very get-go, deciding how do you want people to connect with what you do, whether it's an article, a document, or a presentation that you'll be presenting like this. With a bit of forethought and preparation, all the time that it takes trying to beautify stuff at the end, all the complications that might arise trying to make stuff look good, that'll all be in the past. So how can you save a lot of time and look seriously professional? Well, before we get into that, if you didn't attend the last presentation and you're not as familiar with me, I'm Robert. I've been with Come On Out since 2018. I'm passionate about creating awesome learning experiences, preaching the joys of linguistics, and playing video games for a bit longer than I should. I've also worked as a journalist for UCL, my university. I certified as a life coach, and I founded my own public speaking training company, Masters of Impact. So suffice to say, I've designed a few more articles and presentations than the average person has in the space of a few years. So let's get right into it. What are the objectives of this presentation? The first one is to help you to brush up on your design skills. Learn about how to make the best use of colors, fonts, and symbols. The second is to learn to edit docs. Not just edit like click and type. No. I'm talking about, have you ever changed the formatting on a page and then had to manually, painstakingly go through every other page, select text and change the size of it? You won't have to do that again by the end of this presentation. And the third is to learn to edit slides. Not just editing slides by pasting pictures, dragging shapes around, moving text boxes. It's really about creating your own slide deck. And it's easy if you just know where to look. So let's start off with understanding the elements of what makes a great template. Because these are the same elements that make a great presentation or a great article or any kind of great document. It's really understanding about how can you make a big statement with just a few things. And I actually want to make a point and say that design is a lot like cooking in a way. Cooking is about taking a few ingredients, combining them to make the end result. If your ingredients are bad, you're not going to have a very tasty end result. If you use too many ingredients, not one of them will actually shine in the final product. But if you choose a few high quality ingredients and you combine them, you will taste and appreciate every one of them. Not the sexiest picture, but this was my pizza that I made recently. As we all have to do with lockdown hobbies, I learned how to make pizza. And pizza is actually surprisingly easy when you get down to it. It is just 3 basic ingredients. It's the dough, it's the tomato, and it's the mozzarella. If you use any, especially when you're making your own pizza, if you skimp out and make any of these cheap, you will taste it. Or rather, you won't. It won't be good. A template is like that. If you skimp out on the critical elements, you'll feel it. And you'll kind of wonder why you've bothered making a template. So great ingredients equals great design. A great template is like a great pizza. It's comprised of a few high quality ingredients that come together to make something that's more than the sum of its parts. And the point of a template is to make it easier to write what you want people to read, and make it easier to present what you want to share, and just make it easier to just look good. There is a lot that can be said about design, so I'm going to give you the basic rundown of what you need to get off to a flying start. So let's talk about three things: fonts, colors, and symbols. These are the three basic elements of any template, I'd argue. And I'd like to say this is all self-taught. So this is me speaking from experience, what I have found to help me the best. The first is font. A font is your voice when you cannot speak. Choose it wisely and treat it well. And I cannot stress that enough. If you are lazy with your font choice, people will notice. Maybe not like I notice, because I'm an obsessive designer, but people will feel it. Your choice matters. It's like talking to people in the right tone of voice. The second is colors. Colors are like music. They have a harmony between them, and they don't all need to be loud, and they don't all go together. So you have to be conscious with the way you pair colors together, or if you use colors at all. And then with symbols. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and using the right symbolism is especially key to branding. So let's put these elements into context. To give you a feel for these elements in practice, I'm going to be using a pamphlet I designed in one of my past personal projects, The Luminaries. This was an education initiative with the intention that you would nominate a student or a teacher that made a big difference in education. And this pamphlet was designed to recruit people for my team of luminaires. Here's a few of the pages from this document. I would like to say, be very cautious with the yellow. Yellow can very quickly be not your friend. And I'm still not confident that in this particular design, I chose the right shade. So let's start off with the rundown on fonts. There's always a question. How do I, as an observer, relate to your work? And I'm going to be extremely blunt here and give my opinion. If I see Arial, Calibri, or Times New Roman, I think you don't care. If I see Comic Sans or Papyrus, you're a memer. Make your font choice reflect your work. So I'd like to qualify what I just said here. Arial is a very basic font. You see it everywhere. And it's almost like an everyman font, but it doesn't really look that good. If you use it, it is good for cross-platform where you don't know if people have access to your fonts. Very few fonts are shared between PC, Mac, and the Google Suite, which is actually a huge issue that I run into. Calibri is the basic font for Word and PowerPoint. And Times New Roman is that font that we all used in school. And it's just uninspiring because we've seen it so many times. And I have another point about why I would actually avoid using Times New Roman 2 points from below. But the bottom line here is make your font choice reflect your work. In this presentation and all the presentations I do for Come On Out, I use Proxima Nova. Proxima Nova is a very beautiful, simple geometric font. You see it right before you. And it is made that it looks easy to read on a screen. Then the second question would be, how distinct are your fonts? If you've ever looked at it, consider a document that you've looked at where it was really obvious where things were. What was the title of the entire paper you're looking at? What designated a header? What gave you a sense of what sections were where? If you thought that all those things were well laid out, the fonts were distinguished in a good way. If you make titles all the same size, you don't really vary bolding that much or italics, all that kind of stuff, it gets very hard to actually appreciate what's on the screen. So consider how big the elements are. Are they easily distinguishable? How are you using them? Is the font choice consistent? Pick a font and stick to it. And consistency is important because as I think is on the next slide, never pair two very similar looking fonts. They clash. And then the third, and this relates to what I was saying about Times New Roman. Should I use serif or sans serif fonts? What a serif is it's, I'm going to say, a fancy French word to mean the little strokes at the ends of letters. So if you look at the word serif there, I use Times New Roman. It has these little extra things on the S, on the I, on the R, on the F, all those little extra things. Google's old logo used to be serif, for example. So on screens, sans serif fonts are cleaner and easier to read, especially when they're zoomed out. You want to minimize the noise. So sans serif fonts like Proxima Nova, Seago UI, Myriad Pro, these are really good fonts because they have good spacing and they scale really well. And serifs, though, they can have a place. You can use them together if you're smart, like a title body pairing, or if you just want something to look a bit more traditional. Personally, I love Garamond. Garamond is a humanistic serif font. It looks very beautiful. And whenever I want something to look a bit more old-timey professional, that's my go-to font. So here's an example, actually, of how I used font in the luminaries. I used Century, a serif font, as the header. So anywhere where I was giving a title, that's Century. You can see it. It has all the little extra lines. Century Gothic is a sans serif font in the same family, so they pair really well together. But not all fonts will pair together well. Which is to say, don't use Times New Roman with Proxima Nova just because one is serif and one is sans serif. They need to have elements in common or else they won't look good together. Generally, I just like to use a sans serif font throughout, which is why I only use Proxima Nova throughout this presentation and the other documents that I've designed today. But for the luminaries, I wanted a bit more distinction there. There's a lot more I could say about font, but now I want to get to colors. With colors, a question you want to ask is, what do my colors represent? A thoughtful use of color creates association. A thoughtless one creates chaos. And if you are using branded materials, you must use branded colors. So for Come On Out, we have a bunch of colors that are red. We have a bunch of reds and blues and a yellow. You want to stick to those if you're doing something for Come On Out Japan, for example. Or when I was doing the luminaries, I used purple and yellow. So I use those as the color scheme for everything I did with luminaries. Secondly, ask yourself, how do they make my work clearer? Think if you've ever read a badly formatted textbook and think about how much pain that was. Giving different colors to headers, subheaders, and body text makes it easier to skim and find what you want. Which, as you can see on this presentation, the title is always going to be teal. Header 1 is always going to be orange, and the body text is always black. So you always know, if you want to get the key summary, you just look for the orange. If you want to get an even broader summary of what's in the presentation module, you look at the teal. Do not underestimate how much you make people's lives better by making it so they can be lazy more easily. And then third, what color harmonies am I using? Colors are like music, and the wrong pairings can feel very discordant. Be aware of the color harmonies you're using and be conscious of the impact you want them to have. Now, you might be saying right now, what's a color harmony? And that's an entirely fair question. A color harmony is this. A color harmony is the relationship between colors, and certain colors pair together a lot better than other ones. So if you put colors into a color wheel, if you choose two colors on opposite sides, you'll get a complementary color scheme. This is why the Christmassy colors of red and green look great together. This is why purple and yellow really strike each other. This is why blue and orange really bring out the best in each other. And it's also why I use teal and kind of a reddish orange here. They're complementary. Complementary colors bring out the fire in each other. But you can also go analogous, where you have a bunch of colors that are just next to each other on the color wheel. That's also a good choice. Or triadic, colors that are equally spaced apart from each other. And I could go on, square, rectangular, split complementary. There's lots of different relationships here. You don't have to memorize all of them. The point is, color is not random. Good color that enhances your work and enhances each other is deliberate. So be conscious when you're choosing your colors. And there are some excellent color pickers out there, by the way. If you just search color palette generator on Google, you will find an incredible website, which I'll just Google on my other screen right now. Color palette generator. It's called Coolors, COOLORS.co. It's a great website for generating palettes. So then, as I acknowledged with the luminaries color scheme, I just went complementary. Because personally, I love complementary. I love making things stand out and be striking. So doing this kind of deep, almost indigo tinged purple and this slightly yellowed yellow, because pure yellow is a nightmare, let me tell you, was a great way to make these colors work. So again, I could say so much more about colors, and believe me, I would, but I want to be mindful of time, and I wanted to give you the rundown on symbols. When it comes to symbols, questions you need to ask yourself are, what do my symbols represent? Like color, symbols are about association. Consider what kind of symbolism, shapes, icons, and pictures are embedded in what you regularly see. And also ask yourself, are they subtle? Because symbolism is great for showing the relationship between a piece of work and something greater. If they take center stage, they overshadow everything you're doing. So for example, the Come On Out logo that I designed is basically comprised of 3 circles. It's a C and 2 O's right beneath it. So as a result, this entire presentation makes repetitive use of the circle motif. But it's not intended to be a thing that you all stare at. It's not intended to be a thing that you focus on. It's just an element there that shows association. Good symbolism is not so explicit that you feel the need to think about it all the time. Which then, of course, leads to the last consideration. Will it add to what I'm creating? Fonts and colors will always be a critical element that you'll always have to make a call on. Even if that call is I'm using no colors or I'm using a system font, default font. Symbols can be very situational and you don't have to add them. So use them responsibly or don't use them at all. But it's still good to be aware of them. So with the luminaries, what I made use of is that because the logo has these very distinctive purple bars, I made this a recurring theme throughout luminaries branding. So whenever I had an indent, I always used a vertical bar. I would use boxes to make stuff stand out. And on the last page, which is the Who's the Founder page, I had a bar that was as thick as the logo bar. So a very conscious use of just repetitive imagery that was symbolic of the logo. The title is wrong. The point is, what is the summary of this section? The summary of the section is 3 things. Your font is your voice. The way you style your text will affect how people perceive it, so choose wisely. And your colors are a melody. Colors can add life to an otherwise boring copy, and they can throw attention, and they can also throw attention out the window. So be thoughtful with how you use them. And symbols can be an act of subtlety. They can make your work distinct, and they can depict relationships. So consider them and how you want to do them. So then the question becomes, more practically, how do you make templates effortlessly? Let's start off with documents. How can you create a professional writing template? So I'm going to quickly run through the slides that I have here, and I'm going to actually show you in practice. With all the slides that I create, I'm always conscious of the fact that not everybody will watch this presentation. So people will still have the slides, so I choose to make slides that can still be read without the speaking. But I'm going to show you how you can turn one document from what's on the left-hand side to something on the right-hand side. This was a document that I wrote back in August when we were delivering the Toshin Global English Workshop. And the first thing to keep in mind is you don't want to edit line by line. You want to use themes. So what I'm showing here is when you click on a font, at the very top to the right of the font size, the font type, there's also things that say normal text, title, subtitle, heading 1, heading 2. You can use these to create a theme so that if you look in the right-hand side, you'll see I have selected what if I go for sing this program. I applied heading 2, and now it mirrors a preset template. And the best thing is anything in the document that is marked as heading 2 will change at the same time if I say update heading 2 to match. So don't edit things line by line, use themes. Identify what you'll use for your titles, headings, and body text. Realistically, most documents, you're only likely to really use 2 to 3, plus normal body. Personally, I like to make use of a big title for the main page, heading 1 for a page title, and heading 2 for sections within an article. And if you assign all these things consistently, making a change to one can make a change to all of them to ensure consistency. And make sure that you use colors that are clear and professional. So in this document, I'm going to show you how I use the Come On Out palette, the Come Out Japan palette, predominantly cerulean and flush mahogany to stylize the Coach's Guide template. But this isn't all just for show, because themes will index your template, which is especially good if you are making notes. If you are making notes for recurring meetings, ensuring that you consistently use the title or heading 1 will mean that on the left-hand side of the document, you will always see these things come up. So in the excerpt that I took from the Coach Guide, I have the title, I have the preface, and I have the top 4 tips for coaching. And beneath that, you can see all the sub-points that make up that presentation. So to make a robust you need to make a robust template so you don't have to do lots of little changes. It saves a lot of time in the long run. But avoid making those little changes, because little changes add up. If you're just adding a bit of extra spacing to one part of the presentation, or you're doing a bit of a color change here or there, change spacing, if you ever try to update a theme, you'll have to go around and fix up all those exceptions instead of making the entire process smooth. These are some more advanced considerations, but for the time being, I just want to show you the basic idea here. So I'm going to show you live how I can change this to what it actually looked like in the final one. So right now, I want you to pay attention here. Everything is marked as normal text. When you type normally, everything is normal text, and all you will do is be adjusting things like the size, the coloring, that sort of stuff. So since we already have a bunch of stuff here that has some distinction, what I want to show you is what happens when I start selecting this stuff and making this a header. So this is now heading 1. Let's look over the side here. This is now heading 1 as well. This is the title. And because it's bigger now, I want to spread that out a little bit more. Going to make this a subtitle and space it out a bit more as well. Now, if I was doing this from scratch, so actually let's go back a bit. So let's say that this Coach's Guide, let's update title to match. So now title looks like this. I want to get the right, I want it to look the way I want it to. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to open the Coming Out branding. I'm going to come over to Cerulean and copy this thing. This is called a hex code. A hex code essentially gives coordinates for how bright, so like what color is it, where is it on the color spectrum, how bright is it, how dark is it, how saturated is it. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to bring it over here. I'm going to click plus on the custom and just paste that there. Now I've got this color. And now I'm going to make this bigger. So I want it to be, let's say 72. And I want this to no longer be Arial, I want this to be Proxima Nova. So now this is the title. The title still shows the old one. But I'm going to say update title to match. So now the title looks like this. And now I can do what I want to do to make it look nice. Over here for the subtitle, I'm going to recreate that. So I'm going to select this text. I'm going to make it light blue. I'm going to put it just like that. I'm going to change the font to Proxima Nova as well. And then I'm just going to apply a subtitle because I didn't cleanse all the themes originally here. It should not be this easy, but you can tell that I basically just backtracked an existing theme. But actually, here's one thing that I should change. I'm going to select everything. I'm going to make it all Proxima Nova because I don't want it to be Arial. And actually, let's go to the preface here. This all looks Arial. Now it's Proxima Nova. You can immediately see that it looks a lot smoother than it did before. And it looks a lot more deliberate because it's no longer a font that you immediately recognize as just a basic system font. So I've already done the changes to the headers I cheated by giving the end result in advance. So I'd actually like to show you instead is this. I'm going to go through all of what I call header 2, and I'm going to reset it to what it was from scratch. So now it's just 14-point font Proxima Nova. I'm going to go through the entire document, and I'm going to set it as header, as heading 2, and you'll see why in a second. Also, notice on the left-hand side how this text is now changing where it is. It's indented now. So the guide notices where everything is, and it's now updating like that. Let me also change this. On the right-hand side, you see your coach's guide. I don't want that because I hit enter. I'm going to do backspace. I'm going to press shift-enter. So this is considered to be part of the same line. Now it's all together again. And I want this to be heading 1, and I want this to just be subtitle. So notice how to do that, all I had to do was just reselect a theme from there. I didn't have to fiddle with the size or the color, copy pasting, nothing. I just had to go into the themes that already existed. I'm going to delete a few extra spaces here. I'm going to bring this back up. As a little hint here, it's very difficult to get pictures in a Word document like this. So what I actually did was I got let's make it visible. I got a table. This is literally a table, and I made it invisible, and it allowed me to put all this stuff here. And it also means that I can adjust how close or far this is to the edge just by adjusting that. Tables are very effective. Oops, let's not do that. Tables are very effective, and they're even nicer when they're invisible because they give you the organization without looking so wiry. So let's go here. This stuff all looks fine because the body font was just intended to be 12-point Proxima Nova anyway, but I'm missing the color of my header. So I'm going to copy Flush Mahogany from here. I'm going to select this text. I'm going to go into plus, paste that color, and now it looks good. But usually I'd have to go down here and do this with all of them. I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to go here, heading 2, update heading 2 to match. Everything's changed now. Which also means that if I change my mind and I say, I actually hate this red, I don't want this red, I want it out of my life, I can go over here, change it to light blue because I don't like reading things, update that to match, and now everything's blue. So this is the reason why you actually want to do templates at the beginning, because instead of having to go through and spend way too much time that I would rather not spend on highlighting everything and changing it, I can just do all this change all at once. Speaking of which, I want that to be red again. So let me just, and I undid the update. So you can also undo changes to themes. But it's a very different document from how it looked before. And what I actually tend to do, I'm going to bring this over from my other screen. What I tend to do as well is that I will bold things so that the key points are visible. But that is, unfortunately, you can't template that. That has to be done manually. Oh, and one more thing that I forgot to do. Some people hate this. My English teacher loathed this. I love it. Justify the text. So instead of having things kind of have this kind of sawtooth edge, everything just kind of feels nice and fit like that. It works very well unless you've got a lot of really long words on one line, in which case you'll end up with a really erratic spacing. But you can see now how this has just completely changed the document from just being a black and white document to being something that is really nice and easy to read. And with a bit more time, I can make it even nicer and even easier. Also, pro tip, don't use black. Black is a nice enough color, but doing a little bit of a dark gray for your body font makes it a little softer on the eyes whilst not obscuring your ability to read it. So this is still black. So let's just select this font here, do that. Now it's all lighter shaded gray. I'm going to update normal text to match. And now everything is everything should have been the right color. Clearly something didn't work. Is that really good? Well, I don't know what happened. But everything that is normal text should update there. Maybe it's because I copy pasted it. I'm not sure. But I will actually say a teaching point here. Here's a reason to be cautious of normal font. So let's say that I just mimic this. I'm going to make it 14. I'm going to make it bold. I'm going to make it red. But it's not marked as header 2. It's marked as normal text. If I now say update normal text to match this, ordinarily, this would be reset to that font. Again, I'm not sure what's actually happening. Usually normal text should just completely wash away everything. So this is why it's good to be conscious. Not only does it give you all this nice stuff over here on the left for navigation, which is very responsive. It's 3. But you risk completely ruining all of your formatting work if you try to update the base font, because there's nothing worse than having to go through multiple paragraphs, select them, and do this change, and then move on and keep doing that for an entire document. So I could keep talking on literally just this point for hours. Believe me, I have, but I want to respect your time, so I'm going to move on to the second practical part of this presentation. But hopefully this already gives you a sense of what you have to do here. Templates with Word are not hard. Templates with docs are not difficult. It is really just a matter of using this menu. You don't have to do anything else other than use this menu and click and update these things to match, and then apply them. If you can just do those clicks, you can make everything super easy to use, and also make it so that if you design nice formatting that you want somebody else to use, you don't make their life difficult at all. So let's go back to this presentation, and I'm going to just give you a little look under the hood of this one. This is a lot harder to just kind of give like an overall glimpse at, because presentations are a lot more wily by nature. But how can you create an easy to edit presentation? That's the question here. You want to understand something called Edit Master. So to edit slides, you go into the toolbar at the top, you click Slide, and you click Edit Master at the bottom in the drop-down menu. What this does is that it opens up an entirely different editing suite, which allows you to edit the templates used by the document. So the coolest parts of my presentation are built in. So for example, those C slides that mark the sections, the C is built in. I cannot drag that C around. I cannot move it. The text box is also built in. Everything is already there. So it means that I can actually, at any given moment, just click this plus over here and create a section header. Most people, and we've all been there, would instead have to copy, paste the C from another slide, paste it into the slide, and move it around. Don't do that to yourself. It's a lot easier to do this. So a lot of these things can be built in, and I'm going to show you in a second how it looks just in there, so you can see this kind of change you can effect just by using that menu. So if I change that section header template, every slide with that C will adapt. So for example, here you see that I use Proxima Nova bold, 24-point font. Let's say I don't like that. Let's say that it's taking up too much space. I want it to be 12-point font so I can write a paragraph in there instead. I could change that and it would change every C slide, instead of me having to go through the 5 parts of my presentation and edit that manually. Plus, templated elements are baked in and won't get selected if you click them. So for example, all these fanciful circles, they don't exist. I can try as hard as I want. I'm not going to drag that anywhere. I can move that around, sure, but that's because it's a text box. But if I delete this, then it goes back to being a template. So apparently this slide was intended originally to be was supposed to be a statistics page. So the filler text says XX%. And that's different because if I delete all the text in a regular text box, it won't look like that. So when it comes to editing a master slide, it'll change all slides that use it. I created the slide deck by modifying an existing template, actually. The original color scheme was blue, the font was called Montserrat, and the squares existed where you now see circles. This, of course, came from my favorite slides website, slidesgo.com. Highly recommend. So rather than have to fix every slide that I make, so rather than having to overwrite an existing template, I just delved right into the guts of it and I just pulled all the wires out and reformatted it the way that I wanted it to be. So instead of having to fix every slide I create now will have the formatting I want exactly. And if I wanted to, I could change the font on every slide, and it would take me half a minute, not half an hour. All slide templates you create can be found at the plus in the upper left. So in contrast to before, though, don't be afraid to make changes, because as long as you use the slide master to do them, as long as you use the slide master to do the changes, if they are major. If it's a minor change, like moving a text box around, don't feel the need to create a new template. I certainly don't. But if you want to have a presentation be consistent and have it be so that you don't have to do lots of copy pasting, lots of fiddling around, do use Slide Master exclusively. There's a lot you can do to create a great presentation. So make sure you have fun with it and be willing to try things out as you go along, because that's really the way that I learned. So before we round off the presentation, I'm going to give you a quick show under the hood. So here you go, toolbar, slide, edit master. It's very similar in Keynote and in PowerPoint. They're all very similar technologies. So here you can see the master. So you can see that all titles will draw from this font and all lists will draw from here. This is what my title slide looks like. So the slide at the beginning of my presentation originally looks like this. Cool thing I discovered actually, this is not opaque. This is transparent. And I discovered that if you do a transparent shape, you can right click here, change background, choose image. Let's say Google image search. Let's say, I don't know, for the sake of it, Japan. There you go. Let's say I like this pagoda. Insert. Done. Now that's there. And I can't drag that image around accidentally. It won't interfere with me typing at all. And I could just keep that shape in the background there. But I don't want that. I want the silk screen. So I'm going back. And I actually only learned that by making these two presentations, this one and the professional development one that came before it. This was through my experimentation. But let me show you what happens if I change the font. So let's actually change a specific one. Let's change a specific slide. So there's one that I use a lot. Here we go. This is title and 3 columns. So right now, they all have Proxima Nova. Let's change them to Comic Sans. And let's make the color whatever this is. Ugh. Okay. So now if I go back, I hate myself now. So that's the kind of change you can do without having to do so much. And look, I can hate myself not just on this slide, I can hate myself on this slide too. Even this one. And I'm going to quickly undo all that. And now I can go back. And life is once again restored to order. But instead of having to go through those 3 slides and manually hate myself, I could just do it once and have it happen everywhere. And I'm going to level with you. I don't know if this will have the bombastic effect I think it might, but let's just change this to Times New Roman and change all of this to caveat. Did this change all the text everywhere? It did. So that is an even higher level of editing the master, where now all the text everywhere has been changed. But also, my bolding has been preserved. So if you decide that you actually change your mind about the font you wanted to use, or you change your mind about the color, it's as simple as just changing this. But also notice this. Here I changed the text to Times New Roman, and that was kept. So anything that obeys the master template will be changed, but anything that you have done manually will stay there. Which again is why if you make a bunch of changes, be conscious of it. Because if I wanted this to be consistent, I would now have to come through here and fix it. But I don't want to fix it because I don't want this. There we go. I would say that there's a lot you can do with templates like this, and far more than I could cover in this presentation. But there's lots you can do just moving elements around, putting stuff in the background, and it allows you to free up the slides that you do so that only the stuff you want to change is there. And instead of having to do lots of copy pasting, everything you need is just prepared there. Does this take time? Yes, it does. It does take time to do this work. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. But it's really one of those things that there's a metaphor that if you cut a tree for too long and your axe gets dull, you might feel like, oh, I can't stop chopping this tree now. I have to keep working. But your axe is dull. Your progress is going to be slower. You're going to be less effective. Taking the time to sharpen the hatchet can drastically change the speed in which you do your work and how good the end result is. So with that, let's wrap this presentation up. In summary, what can you do to save time and look great? The first point is this: use key elements. Fonts, colors, and symbols are yours for the taking, so use them. Format documents. A little bit of preparation to set up themes goes a long way. And reshape slide decks. Never have to go through dozens of slides to click and change things ever again. Just be conscious on how you edit the master, and you'll find a stride. So let's take, for the sake of time, 2 minutes. How will you use what you've learned today? Just write it down somewhere, maybe in a piece of paper in front